All right. I'm pausing to make sure that we are streaming online, but it looks like we are good to go. This is Chair French convening the regular business meeting of the Kansas Corporation Commission for Thursday, October 23rd, joined by my colleagues Commissioner Keene and Commissioner Keither. We apologize for the slow start, just a quick technical hiccup, but we're good to go now. On today's agenda, we just have a consent agenda consisting of 10 items, and then we will have a public hearing on some regulations, followed by a commission roll call vote. So with that, commissioners, let's first turn to our consent agenda. You've had the opportunity to review the 10 items on it. Let me ask at this time if there are any questions, beginning with Commissioner Keither.
Thanks, no questions.
And Commissioner Keene. Commissioner Keene, you are muted.
Let's try with the mic this time. No questions for me either. I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The consent agenda is approved. We will now move to our one other item, which, as I mentioned, is a public hearing on adoption of regulation KAR 823144 as a permanent regulation, followed by a commission roll call vote. But first, we do have our presenter, Mr. Tristan Kimbrell. Good morning, Tristan.
Good morning. Thank you. Tristan Kimbrell appearing on behalf of staff and the public generally.
All right. Tristan, do I have a script for this?
No, I believe I could give staff's recommendation on notice.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay. Pursuant to the Kansas Rules and Regulations Filing Act, a minimum 60-day public comment period is required before an agency may adopt a permanent regulation. On August 14th, 2025, Commission staff caused to be published in the Kansas Register notice of this public hearing, thereby exceeding the 60-day requirement of the Act. Additionally, the Commission granted staff's motion to open an investigatory docket regarding the proposed regulation as a means of keeping the public and the Commission apprised of the promulgation process. As publication of notice in the Kansas Register constitutes notice to all parties affected by the regulation, staff recommends the Commission find that notice is proper and that it has jurisdiction to conduct this hearing at this time and at this place.
All right, thank you. The commission will find notices proper and we have jurisdiction to hear these regulations. At this time, Tristan, do you have a presentation on the regulation before I call for any public comments?
Yes. So as a bit of background on this regulation, KSA 55-180F1 states that any well that has been abandoned for 5 or more years may be plugged by a person with no obligation to plug the well, and the person who plugs the well may then seek reimbursement from the Abandoned Oil and Gas Well Fund. The statute continues that the KCC shall adopt rules and regulations for determining whether, how, and to what extent a request for reimbursement shall be granted. The proposed regulation before you today satisfies the requirement of the statute by providing the process for persons to seek reimbursement from the Abandoned Oil and Gas Well Fund after plugging abandoned wells. The proposed regulation requires persons interested in plugging an abandoned well to first submit a plugging reimbursement application to the KCC. The application must include an estimate of the total plugging cost for the well, and then the director of the Conservation Division may then approve or deny the application. If the plugging reimbursement application is approved, the person may then plug the abandoned well, being sure to follow all KCC rules and plugging regulations. After the plugging is complete, the person must submit a post-plugging certification of completion, and this post-plugging certification must include all plugging invoices for the plugged well, along with the total requested reimbursement. So a person who plugs an abandoned well within 6 months of the director approving a plugging reimbursement application and then successfully submits a post-plugging certification of completion will be reimbursed from the Abandoned Oil and Gas Well Fund. This proposed regulation is expected to have de minimis implementation and compliance costs for individuals and businesses. Only persons who apply for reimbursement from the Abandoned Oil and Gas Well Fund will be affected by this regulation. And those who do request reimbursement, the proposed regulation merely requires the filling out of the plugging reimbursement application and the post-plugging certification of completion. And so with that, I would be happy to stand for any questions. And I believe Conservation Division Director Ryan Hoffman is also available to answer any questions.
All right, well, let me turn first to my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Keen or Commissioner Keither. Do either of you have any questions for Tristan or Ryan?
No.
Commissioner Keen?
Yes, thank you, Chair French. I do. I think by way of overview for the public here, and this I could address either to you, Tristan, or to Ryan, either one of you. Can you give us a little backfill here on the vetting process as it evolved and as this regulation went through that vetting process?
Director Hoffman, would you like to answer that?
I would love to. Good morning.
Ready.
The vetting process with regard to this regulation probably goes back almost 6 years. When we first proposed making changes to KSA 55-179, which is our abandoned well plugging responsibility statute. The suggestion was made that we look into making this type of program, and then from there, while we worked on that statute, we sought input from industry and from our oil and gas advisory, and then found a way to include it in the actual legislation that came forward in 2020 and then was ultimately passed in 2021. The regulation itself, then, we worked with both Cayuga and ECOGA on several drafts back and forth over the course of about 2 years, in part because there were times where it sat either in our shop or their shop, but it was also concurrent with the implementation of our initial federal plugging grant, that $25 million grant. So that took precedence over drafting. But ultimately, it came back to the oil and gas advisory, and the product that you have in front of you today is the result of that process.
Brian, when you may have mentioned it there, and if you did, I could have missed it. But when was the enabling legislation enacted?
It was 2021. It initially was proposed in 2020, but obviously the COVID session was shortened, the legislative session that year. So,
yes. Well, thank you for that. I was listening in yesterday to the Joint Committee on Rules and Regulations, and in particular your presentation before that, which I thought was really quite good. I want to kind of address together two of the questions that were presented by members of the Joint Committee. First, the question I address is one of the House members of the committee raised a question. I wouldn't say a concern necessarily. It was a question about what other states have done, and basically is Kansas too far ahead of the power curve? That's my words, not his. Your response to that, please.
I don't think we're too far ahead. I think the word I used in response was that we might be pioneers, because it was the sort of thing that when I announced at the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission during the regulator session that we were pursuing this, I had several other states come up to me and say, well, when you get that through, let us know what it looks like, because we'd be interested in doing something like that as well. And that's usually, I think, how it works with states, is if somebody figures out a good program, then everybody wants to sort of piggyback off of what they've started. So that was my interpretation of that.
Yes, you articulated far better your comments than I did, but I would add my own opinion on top of yours. This is indeed pioneering, and I think Kansas gets credit, not criticism. I'm not suggesting that the representative was criticizing, but that we get credit for being pioneers in this area. This involves a fairly complex set of issues. We're trying simultaneously to allow for more plugging to take place. We're trying to provide another avenue through which that plugging can take place. In any event, any wells that are plugged are all going to be plugged by licensed contractors, licensed by the Corporation Commission. So that protection is in there. But it actually gives landowners some protections where they can, of their own volition, move forward if they can find a plugging contractor, follow the strictures of the reg, get the approval of the Conservation Division, and the process can really implement a plugging process here, and then ultimately be reimbursed out of the plugging fund for those efforts, again with the supervision of the Conservation Division. And I think that this is a net major plus for rural landowners throughout the state. By the same token, I believe that the industry benefits substantially because with the number of wells that there are to be plugged out there, I think that this helps reduce that backlog, that inventory, if you will, and in all instances, it's beneficial. Furthermore, I think that because of the strictures of the regulation, the fee fund and the expenditure of fee fund monies are well protected because there is an oversight on that expenditure process by the Conservation Division and in particular the director. So I think there's a lot of benefit that is entailed in this, and I think that we are to be credited. The Conservation Division is to be credited. The advisory committee credited. The legislature as well. Representative Hoffman, if he was the one who was instrumental in pushing this forward initially, he should certainly be commended for that as well. So this is a net plus plus. Didn't intend to have my comments quite that long, but I feel pretty strongly about the regulation. I'm thrilled that you've gone through that process. Let me allude to one other question that was presented to you, and it was presented by both a Senate member and a House member, and that had to do with how come it took so long, 21 and date of enabling legislation, until 25 for this to come to fruition and on the eve of being approved. I'll add my own 2 cents worth to your thoughts on that as well. The commission takes the vetting process with the public through the advisory committee and the diversity of membership on the advisory committee. We take that very seriously. That's an important mechanism for allowing a diversity of opinion to focus on individual subjects, in this case, well plugging in a unique fashion. And really, it's not a rushed process. It's a very deliberative process. And because of the complexity of it, because of the novelty of what we're doing here, it's no wonder, mixed in with COVID, just to make it a little more complicated, that it took the amount of time that it did to go through this process. By the time you vet the various aspects and attributes of the regulation, making sure that the protections are in place for the state, the protections are in place for the industry, and most importantly, the protections are in place for the landowners that are involved. So I think on that, my kudos really go to you, Ryan, for overseeing this process. It was multifaceted. It just took some time. These things happen. It's the way it happens. I think that deliberative process means that the rulemaking process within the commission is first rate, and that's a very biased opinion. I would certainly, in fairness to you, give you the benefit of responding to any or all of my comments and offering different views if you wish.
I would first say thank you for your kind words, but I would admit there was some fault there on our part, and both our part and the industry's part, in that there were at least 2 different periods where we were waiting on each other and didn't know we were waiting on each other. So it maybe could have been about 6 months shorter process, but all in all, I think it was, as you said, very deliberative and worthwhile.
Very good.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Keith, yeah.
Yeah,
Commissioner
I
Keith,
just
go
want to
ahead.
add my 2 cents in that, just from my experience as a long-term legislator and hearing about abandoned wells and the need for plugging goes way back. And I am just thrilled to see the progress that we've been able to make and just enabling for landowners to go forward. I think it's a kudo for everybody. So thank you very much for the good work. Appreciate it.
Well, I don't believe I have any substantive questions. I will ask, I know our public comment period, aside from today's public hearing, it ended yesterday. Is staff aware of any public comments being filed on this matter?
Chair French, there were no public comments on this matter.
And it's my understanding that we did not have any members of the public register for today's public hearing, and obviously none have attended the Zoom. Does staff have any reason to believe that anybody was planning to attend this Zoom today?
I do not believe anyone intended to attend.
All right, very well. Well, this is the point at which I would ask for public comments on the regulation, but as we've stated, we've received no written comments, and no one has registered to make a comment at this public hearing at this time and place. So we will move directly to a commission roll call vote on approval of the proposed regulation KAR 82.3.144. Commissioners,
We
you
did
have,
lose Keen, just so you
oh,
know. I was hoping he was going to rejoin, but I haven't seen him do that just yet.
let us go into a holding pattern for just a moment while we try to reacquire our third vote. And Tristan, just for clarity, you don't need anything else before we move forward to our vote, do you?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Very well. We are going to pause for just a moment and see if we can get our third commissioner back. I have a feeling he would like to have his vote recorded on this one.
Michelle, can you hear me? Michelle, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
do
I
hear you.
had to find my unmute button.
Okay.
All right, it looks like we are still streaming and recording, so Michelle, once you drop the slide, I will continue. All right, thank you all for bearing with us for just a moment there. We are ready to proceed with a roll call vote, and for a reminder, this is on to approve and file for adoption the regulation KAR 823-144. And so I will begin with a roll call vote for each of the commissioners, and I will begin with myself, Andrew J. French, chairperson. I vote yes. Dwight D. Keene, how do you
Yes.
vote?
Yes.
Annie Keither, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, looks like we've got 3 yes votes. So we will certify for adoption the regulation as described by Mr. Kimbrell. Thank you, Tristan. And I believe at this time we can close the public hearing. Close the public hearing and close the vote on the regulation. So with that, we have come to the conclusion of all the items noticed on today's business meeting agenda. If there is nothing further to come before us this morning, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all. Take care.
Take care.